Joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. So, Senator, you've raised a point that a lot of people have raised, is that you'd like to see you love the president. You literally said that yesterday. Yes. I just said that. But you'd like to see him out there doing more town hall meetings, more events. I think what's hard is how do you measure success? I mean, we're on a short timeline here. The clock is ticking. What are you looking for over the next couple of days? How will you look at it on Friday and say, oh, OK, I can be with him. My constituents can be with him. Yeah,
listen, subtlety does not sell in politics today. My position is pretty simple. I support Joe Biden. He's my president. I've never seen a more effective commander in chief than Joe Biden. I've worked with him intimately. As you know, we passed the first anti-gun violence bill in 30 years that is literally saving thousands of lives as we speak, as crime plummets in this nation. That would have not happened without Joe Biden's detailed daily intervention in those negotiations. So I know what Joe Biden can do. I know how successful he has been for the American people. I support him in this election. But it is just true that people have questions, having watched his performance on Thursday. And it is just also true that people want to be with him. They want to support him, but they want to see him out in settings that show that he is still the old Joe Biden, as he says he is. So what I've suggested is that the president, be in these unscripted settings this week. In part, he did that this morning in the call-in to
Did you like the tone of that?
Yes, I think we need to see more of that. I think that's a good start. I also think it's okay for him to be defiant and angry right now. If he really believes in himself and his ability to beat Donald Trump, then he should be angry and upset at what has happened over the course of the last week. But you are also right that he's got to do more than just show that anger about the circumstances. He's got to show his ability to deliver and assure voters that the performance on Thursday was an anomaly. And I think he can do that this week. And I said the clock is ticking yesterday because we need to get beyond this as a party. We need to get back to the issue at hand, which is a contrast between a decent, honorable man, Joe Biden, and a corrupt felon who pathologically lies and wants to transition our democracy to an autocracy, Donald Trump. That has to be the contrast, and I hope that that's the contrast next week.
So you and I both know well the political cycles. You better. You've been elected to the Senate. I have not. But the end of this week, Donald Trump could pick a running mate. The Republican convention is next week. I mean, does this need to be decided by the end of this week?
I mean, listen, I think we would be very well served by having a decision. And I think President Biden can do things this week to reinstill people's faith in him so that by next week we are back to talking about this contrast. I also think this is an opportunity for a comeback story, and the press and the media in this country loves nothing better than a comeback story. President Biden was down on Thursday night and on Friday morning. And if he comes back and shows this week that he's got the ability to correct from that performance, I frankly think that that's a pretty important and pretty compelling narrative as we head into the summer and the fall. But again, I think it's incumbent upon the president and his team to do the kind of things they did this morning. Get out there, put the president in settings that show Thursday night was an anomaly.
Sounds like you would like to be going into the Republican convention with knowledge of a confidence in who the nominee is going to be.
Because the Republican convention is going to be an advertisement for the most unpopular agenda that any major party has ever run on in the history of the country. They have this document, Project 2025, in which they have
Trump pretends he has nothing to do with, which is ludicrous. But
right. His future cabinet members wrote the document.
Future chief of staff, maybe.
Exactly. And it is unbelievable that Trump and his acolytes have the gall to put down on paper their plan to end American democracy, to end a woman's right to choose everywhere in this country, to single out and persecute gay people and gay kids in this country. That's what we should be talking about next week, which is why I hope the president continues what he started this morning and answers people's questions so that next week we can be talking about this incredibly bright line contrast.
Let me ask you about one piece that's going to impact you a great deal, which is who controls the Senate next year. And there were a number of your colleagues who came out and said that their constituents had expressed questions, that the president needed to do more to prove he was up to the job. One of them is Democrat Jon Tester, who's, of course, in a very close race. And he said President Biden has got to prove to the American people, including me, that he's up for the job for another 4 years. I mean, you've run close races before. How much do the feelings and views of vulnerable senators and vulnerable members of Congress, how much should that weigh in what happens moving forward?
Well, listen, ultimately, I think if President Biden believes that he can do this job and he convinces the voters across this country that he can do the job, then he has met the moment. I'm not saying that John and Sherrod's comments aren't irrelevant, but ultimately this has got to be about what the president believes he can do, and it's got to be about what the broad American electorate believes the president is capable of. John Tester is an independent voice. He's a Democrat, but he just does what's right for
Well, Sherrod Brown expressed
Montana.
Something similar. Senator Brown did.
Yeah, I think you'll continue to see senators like John Tester, who have always been independent voices, agreeing with the president many times and disagreeing with the president many times. That's just who John Tester is. That's frankly who Sherrod Brown is. That's who Bob Casey is. I think that'll continue to be what you hear from them from now until the election.
So how does this conclude? I mean, one of your colleagues, my now home senator, even though you were once my senator, Senator Mark Warner, was going to call together a meeting that was canceled. Does there need to be a meeting where all the senators agree on the path forward? Does that matter? Like, how do we end whatever the path is going to be here?
Yeah, I suggested that one of the ways we end this is for the president to be in forums this week in which he answers those questions. I think the sooner that the president does that, and again, I think he started doing that today, the quicker that we can come to a collective decision that not everyone will agree with, but a broad cross-section of Democrats will agree with, that the president is ready to carry this election forward. So I think that this can end more quickly if the president takes some chances and gets into more unscripted settings this week.
Senator Chris Murphy, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on set tonight. I really appreciate it. And coming up, Democrats are hammering Donald Trump's Project 2025 agenda. The question is, are voters listening?